Okay, we are live. People are like, what is going on? It's only 4 minutes after, and Chad and Zach are actually fired up and rolling. Well, sometimes a blind squirrel finds a nut, right, Zach? But we got to let it breathe just for a moment here. And we're going to get things rolling for everybody. We're really excited to talk to you. It's weird. It's Monday, but it feels like a Tuesday, whatever. Welcome in. It is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me is my fellow football priest, who you know, who you love, Zack Kelberman. Zach, there are a few interesting things to get into tonight relative to Sean Payton, having a day to work out his hormones. We talk about that a lot on the show relative to the gut reaction. He had a day to kind of reflect a little bit on what he said and what he did in the heat of the moment in Detroit, the fog of war, maybe a better way to put it. And then today, of course, peppered right out of the gates on the conference call about the whole Russ thing. What did you make of his? I mean, he did try to address it mostly to kind of gloss over it and hopefully just move on. But he did keep getting brought back to it. What were your thoughts on what he said? And I can read later a couple of the things.
Yeah, I had kind of the same read on it you did. He's trying to tamp it down and make it go away, but when something like that happens with Russell Wilson of all quarterbacks, it's not going to go away so fast. And I think he's still beating around the bush as to the impetus of that blow up, and he's not at liberty to really reveal the nature of it. Russell Wilson was asked after the game if he believes that Sean Payton still has confidence in him, and Russ goes, "Yeah, I mean, of course. Why wouldn't he?" So I'm taking a more optimistic, maybe naive approach and just chalking it up to the emotions of a game, the emotions of a bad sequence of events that went against the Broncos. And hopefully they'll learn from it and be better on Sunday.
So, real quick, guys, any burning topics, questions, stars, supers, get them in the chat early tonight because we're starting a little bit earlier for Zach and I anyway, because I got to bounce out of here for a event for one of my kids, a Christmas thing. So, that being said, like Zeus McPeak, the first face etched on the MHH Mount Rushmore is doing right now, get it in early. We will get to it. Love you, Stu. Hope you're doing well. Give our best to your awesome family and happy holidays. Merry Christmas season. Anyway, it's not Christmas yet, but you get my drift. It says, hi, all bummed about the loss. Hopefully they right the ship Saturday night. Indeed. Indeed. Zach, your thoughts for Stu, and then a couple things I want to get from what Sean Payton actually said today.
Well, Stu, don't gather around the TV on Saturday. The Broncos game is on Sunday night, Christmas Eve against the Patriots. And I mean, I echo what you're saying here. It's a super disappointing, deflating loss. I think every player and coach would admit that. But all they can really do is what Sean Payton said. It's going to be tough to swallow right now, but it'll pass. We'll get over it, and we have to regroup. He gave them the day off today to kind of rest and regain their bearings, and he's hoping that they'll be more energized. That was something that a few people have used, that word, the lack of energy, the lack of morale for the game. Maybe it was 3 straight road games and 3 games in 14 or 13 days, whatever it was, excuse me. But they have to be wholesale improved in every phase against the Patriots, or else that could be another L.
I think it's fair to surmise, Zach, that the fact that it was the last of 3 road games and the fact that this one in particular was a short week, they had to basically microwave their preparation week by 1 day. I think those things played a role in what we discussed last night as far as, I'll listen to any argument about the Lions being a more talented team or this unit of the Lions being more talented than that unit of the Broncos or whatever. But I think the biggest gap yesterday was between the ears stuff, want to, intensity, will to win, all that stuff. And that's where the Lions really excelled. But Stu, we love you, dude. Thank you, my brother. Here's what I'm not going to read the entire first quote. When he was asked, hey, is there anything, coach, that you'd handle differently on that goal to go situation in the third quarter? And the implication being kind of, and what you did / said to Russ. I won't read the whole part, but after he kind of details why he didn't challenge Javonte, he thought maybe there was a shot possibly of Jaleel being able to challenge that one. But being that it happened on second down and he had a third and a fourth down as far as he was concerned, that close, because Jaleel got it down to the 1, It was like, I'm going to take my chances. And obviously, hindsight is 2020. He would have probably challenged it if he could go back in time. But he closed this particular section of his remarks, Zach, by saying the anger and frustration in that sequence comes from the fourth down call and the touchdown and what was later called a penalty. All of a sudden now we're sitting at fourth and call it 6 instead of 4.5 yards. We're trying to get within 2 scores, and it's an important sequence relative to the game and trying to climb back in it, close quote.
Sometimes politician Payton comes out and he talks himself around something without saying much, and this is one of those situations. I think he's too prideful. He has too much ego to admit faults or give the media what they want, which is a black and white answer as to what happened, Chad. If I had to take a guess, though, knowing just how he tends to outsmart himself, knowing how prideful he is, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't challenge because he just assumed that the Broncos were going to score on one of those plays regardless. And when it got to fourth down, he was angry again, either at himself or the offense or whoever, that it wasn't being executed that way. But it still fell on him, Chad. Confidence or not, bravado, whatever. If you think your player got in, throw the challenge flag. That's why they exist. It's why they're there on your person during a game.
What's interesting about that, Zach, is he said, quote, I'm one to throw a challenge flag and burn them and use them, but I didn't feel strong enough that we had crossed the goal line, specifically talking about the Jaleel play. He didn't think Javonte, he didn't feel like he had a good enough angle to judge that one. Zach, later when he was pressed, hey, do you have anything more? This was, I think, Kliss, giving him credit, 9 News, Mike Kliss, kind of pressing Coach Payton a little bit on, hey, Coach, do you have anything more to share about your interaction? I'll call it more of a one-sided altercation with Russell Wilson on the sideline. Quote, Coach Payton, quote, nothing more to share. It's certainly in-game intensity and heat of the moment and all those things. Nothing more to add. So you're exactly right, Zach, that it's not his style to go mea culpa, tail between his legs to placate the media, especially when he's kind of, even though he spent that 1 year in the media, he's never been a guy, Zach, that is beloved by the media. I've talked to a lot of colleagues that have covered him now in New Orleans, and you look at his first year in Denver, he doesn't make your job any easier as media to cover him. He puts a lot of kind of restrictions. There's certain things that teams are forced and mandated to do relative to media, opening the door to certain media things they have to do. But a lot of teams, Zach, they kind of stretch the bounds of some of that stuff in the interest of good faith. And hey, it's better to have our team covered than not, and all this stuff. Sean Payton takes that gray area where most teams are kind of letting media lean into it and maximize, and he shrinks it down to the bare minimum of what he is absolutely required to do relative to NFL rules. And then, sometimes at the podium, he can be a little short. He can be a little bit of a curmudgeon and not very patient with anybody. And so now that, there is a moment of crisis or what you might call a controversy, knives are out.
Just kind of circling back to the quote that he gave about the challenge. Did he say it's not my style to challenge? Was that?
No, he said that he said, quote, exactly what he said here is, my history relative. So he said, I'm one to throw, meaning I'm one who you normally would. I'm one to throw a challenge flag and burn them and use them. But I didn't feel strong enough that we had crossed the goal line. It certainly looks close. My history relative to them changing that type of call has been average at best.
So he's kind of maybe adding fuel to the fire that the officiating crew doesn't really take too kindly to old Sean Payton. Either way, it sounded like a contradiction, Chad. If he's so inclined to throw the flag, then throw the freaking challenge flag. I thought he said he wasn't inclined to do it. And then I was going to say, what else do you have to lose? The worst that can happen is you lose it. You lose the timeout, but you give your offense a breather, a chance to regroup, and maybe call in a better play for that next down.
Let's say hello here to the Ronk. We got Mike in the house. So good to see you. Saying good evening to everybody and MHH. Much love and respect, big dog. Always appreciate you. George Fox jumping in with some star support on Facebook. Good to see you, George. He says, Merry Christmas to all of Broncos country and Happy New Year. Thanks to MHH crew for the greatest pod. Denver Broncos for life. MHH for life. Thank you, George. Right back at you, big dog. Merry Christmas. And obviously, lots more to get to. We'll see what else is on your mind in the chat. But before we do, guys, we got to remind you, all right, you got to make the official pizza sponsor of the NFL. You know who it is, Little Caesars, a part of your game day. It's certainly a huge part of what we do here at my house, both on game day, in the middle of the week. We're running, we're busy, kind of like tonight. We got something cooking with the kids. There's an activity, there's this, there's that. Perfect opportunity. Just bring home pizza. Instead of trying to get home and spend an hour and a half in the kitchen, Little Caesars comes in clutch, and it's always tasty, and it's always a lot of options to choose from. Order online during our Pizza pregame 1 hour before and 3 hours after NFL kickoffs, plus all day Sunday, and get ready for some football and fun. You choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza or pick the toppings you crave, and either way, you win.
And speaking of winning, Chad, everyone scores with convenient delivery or our in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the next Broncos game.
Amen to that. All right. Where are we at? We're at 6:15. Okay. Mayachi in the house with the super chat. What's going on, brother? Welcome. Good to see you. I believe you have super chatted before, but it's been a minute since I've seen you. So welcome. Thank you. Really appreciate you helping us keep the lights on. He says it feels pointless to discuss Russell Wilson's future if there's no clear alternative. The same people who want Jarrett Stidham will be quick to point fingers as soon as things don't go as planned. Yeah, especially the way this offense has kind of been built by Payton to cater to Russ's strengths and weaknesses. I just don't know how satisfied Broncos fans would be if Stidham was all of a sudden thrown in. However, the caveat to that, Zach, is that last preseason game that he started for the Broncos, I was reminded, I'm like, oh gosh, he is a lot better of an athlete than you might think. So maybe I'm kind of overblowing that a little bit.
I tend to take Mayachi's stance here. It's pointless to speculate what the Broncos are going to do. We've laid out the options. We've given our takes and our opinions on what we think the Broncos should do moving forward at quarterback. But until these next 3 games conclude and we get a clearer picture of how the Broncos stand and how Russell Wilson's playing to end the year, it's verbal masturbation, I think, Chad.
There you go. There's a word of the day for you, everybody. Joe Rivas in the house. Good to see you on Facebook, my friend. Appreciate you. He says, great stuff, fellas, covering our Broncos. Thank you. He says, I try to watch all your videos on YouTube. Thanks again, big dog. Let's try to win out, especially beat them Raiders. # Broncos country. Yes, indeed, Phil. And yeah, if you lose to the Patriots, your season's over.
Yeah.
It could be over by virtue of the Lions loss, even if you win out. Eric Trickle has an article coming out tonight. Watch for that at milehighhuddle.com. But if you do, I'm touching wood as I say this, lose to the Patriots on Sunday night, then it's all about snapping the streak the Raiders currently have, which is a 7-game win streak. Phil, down in Tucson, love you, big dog. Thank you so much. He says, Sean Payton, he says, good evening, Chad and Zach, Deacon Scott. Payton got out-coached. Comparing, as of today, the last 4 teams we played, how do the next 3 match up? Good question, bud. # Buckham Go Broncos, MHH for life, win out. Compared to the last 4 teams, which would be what? The Browns, Vikings, Chargers, Lions. Am I missing one?
That's it, I think.
So you get the Chargers again, and you get an Easton Stick probably quarterback there. So that's fortuitous. I mean, unless, as Zach brings up often, somehow the Chargers are able to channel some Rich Bisaccia energy, etc. But none of the remaining opponents really, Zach, are as balanced roster-wise and just overall as any of the teams the Broncos vanquished, removing the Chargers from that previous 4. But it's the NFL. Anything could happen. The good thing here is you're going against backup quarterbacks in all 3 situations. Bad news, Zach, is Bill Belichick. It's both Belichick and Sean Payton are sprigs off the Bill Parcells coaching tree. So they have a lot of the same philosophical outlook on things. And obviously Belichick has evolved into something bigger and greater than Parcells ever was, I would argue anyway. And you could even make an argument that Payton did, especially, 15 years in New Orleans. But Sean Payton, Zach, last thing that I'm serving this over to you, he talked about when he first landed in Denver, how much time he spent early in the his Saints regime studying Belichick and the Patriots, because that was coming on the heels of the first kind of dynasty, if you want to call it that, where they won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. And he used that metaphor about, hey, if you're a pizza shop and the pizza shop across the street has a line out the door, and you've got 1 or 2 people in your joint, you might want to get over there and try and figure out what the secret sauce is, or what the crust recipe is, etc.
Well, Phil, I don't think any two teams are real comparable in the NFL, and what the Broncos have in front of them, they haven't really faced over the course of their winning streak. I mean, you could break it down by team. The Patriots are pretty bad this year, especially on offense with Bailey Zappi and Ezekiel Elliott at running back. But credit to Bill Belichick, who might be fired or he might retire or whatever after the year. His defense is still humming along. They gave Patrick Mahomes fits yesterday, picked him off twice. It is not going to be easy. And Belichick is going to game plan to take the Broncos rushing attack away and make Russell Wilson beat them, not just on the line of scrimmage, but down the field. It could be a tough matchup. The Chargers, the Broncos just faced them and beat them. They have Easton Stick, an interim head coach. The Raiders, though, they're the feisty bunch. They have the Broncos number. It's the end of the year, last game of the season. They're going to want to spoil the Broncos playoff odds if the Broncos are still in the mix by that point. But someone asked me during the Chargers-Raiders game, and they said, Zach, are you still worried about the last game of the season? Does this influence your opinion? And my answer was, if they can't beat Aiden O'Connell and Antonio Pierce to get into the playoffs, they don't deserve to be there anyway. Yep. So these are 3 games, and I know we can't use gimme for the Broncos. We can't use they're supposed to beat in this kind of season, but these really are teams the Broncos are supposed to beat. And if they have any designs of getting to the playoffs.
Yeah. Especially Zach, if you considering the 1-5 start, if this team at least finishes 500 or even 1 game over, that's a victory, and it's a step in the right direction. I think Peter says, thank you, Peter, by the way, appreciate the super. What are your thoughts on if we win out but still miss the playoffs? That's kind of what I'm getting at here, Zach, is, especially with how things started, I'm not talking moral victories. I'm talking 10,000 foot meta. Are we trending in the right direction? Avoiding what would be a 7th straight losing season. I'm starting to lose track of the numbers here. It would at least be a plus and show that you're moving in the right direction.
Yep, absolutely.
Peter, thank you, big dog. Really appreciate you. I can't tell what guitar you're rocking there. It looks like maybe an Ibanez, but looks dope, dude. Merry Christmas right back at you. I think the Papa Bear in the house rocking his Buckham t-shirt like a boss. Love it. But Zach, what do you think about we still have too much on the table to spend that much time talking about moral victories and what does it all mean and whatnot. But if they do miss the playoffs, and let's say they finish, I'm looking at the AFC West right now. Let's say the Broncos, who are 7-7, let's say they lose 1 more. All right. So they end up 9-8. What would your 10,000 foot view be, knowing how the season kind of coalesced from a 1-5 hole to how things ended?
9-8. You took down Kansas City. You had a winning record for the first time since 2016. It looks like you have the head coach. The head coach made somewhat of lemonade with the quarterback. I would take it as a success, because that's the expectation in the post-Pat Bowlen era. I always talk about the Pat Bowlen standard, Chad, but unfortunately, Mr. B is not around anymore, and we would all, I think, be happy. Most of Broncos country is just happy that there's competitive, meaningful football in December, that the Broncos aren't eliminated at this point. So if they go 9-8, hopefully you take down the Raiders and that streak. You already took down Kansas City. I would consider that a win, though I'd be a little disappointed considering the winning streak they had if they didn't sneak into the wild card round. Because, Chad, week 1, week 2, the Jets game, the Texans game, those are all there for the taking, and those could be the games that make or break the Broncos playoff chances.
And I don't want to get too much into revisionists and what woulda, shoulda, coulda, and all that stuff, ifs and buts, coconuts, all that. But do you remember how we talked about how crucial it was going to be for this team to make hay in that first quarter of the season? Can you imagine if the Broncos had handled Washington and if they had handled the Raiders to open? There's 2 additional wins right now. You're looking at a 9-5 record. And then maybe you don't lose to the Jets. There's a 10-4 record currently. You could afford right now to not be panicking. But again, that's why in the NFL, it's one of the great things about the league, and why one of the many reasons it's king of the hill, which is every single regular season game is meaningful, as opposed to whatever it is, 160 something of MLB, 82 in the NBA. Not to say they don't count, but they don't individually hold the same level of importance. And Broncos really missed an opportunity to capitalize on that early season schedule.
That's the Sean Payton trademark, apparently, is his team starts slow, and we all figured there'd be speed bumps and hiccups, and there certainly was. It's you look back on it, it's bittersweet. You're happy the Broncos made a run, that they've become a competitive football team, but you're always going to wonder, what if they sacked Jimmy G? What if they didn't blow that lead against Washington? What if they, showed up against Nathaniel Hackett? It's another year of what ifs, Chad.
Indeed. George Fox, again, thank you, buddy. No matter what happens in the last 3 games, we now have a team that can win. Go Broncos. Exactly, dude. And that's one of the things that has been good to see. Come what may, whether the Broncos win or not, and make the playoffs, it's been really refreshing for it to matter again. Yeah, I mean, it's always mattered to us, but I mean matter relative to AFC playoff picture, the AFC West, which – there's a lot of national media people, and especially a lot of people in a certain town in Missouri, trying to dunk on the Broncos and Broncos media for even like trying to speak into existence at all the fact that the AFC West could possibly be wrested away from the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, it's still actually possible. It's not likely, but it's still possible. The Chiefs play the Bengals, Raiders, Chargers. I think they have basically the same final 3 opponents, Zach, as the Broncos, just flip Bengals and Patriots. But I digress a little bit here. The point is, at least it matters for the Broncos this time around. I mean, we're used to the team, even though they're not mathematically eliminated, by Thanksgiving, we know this ain't happening this year. Like by that point, we know quite well it ain't happening. The closest thing we've had to this post Kubiak was the Case Keenum 2018 season, where they went on a little bit of a run, late October, early part of November, thanks to Philip Lindsay before.
Yeah, we got Ted Wunderlich here, 499 Super. Thank you so much, Ted. Let's see the positives here. Our new low point is only 25-point loss rather than 50. We've cut it in half. 10 and 7 still in sight. MHH for life. I appreciate the humor, Ted. I'm sure you're being sarcastic here. And, the last comment said the Broncos learn how to win games again, but they still have to learn to win consistently. You're going to suffer defeats. You're going to have your back blown out occasionally by an opponent, Detroit, Miami being 2. But there's also games where it's a 1-point margin, 2-point margin, or you're up 21 points that you just can't let those victories get away. You can't snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So until the Broncos learn how to do that, to me, that separates them from a borderline playoff team to a perennial contender.
Well said. Thank you, Ted. Good to see you tonight, big dog. And I'll piggyback off of that by saying nobody beats the Broncos 17 times in a row. It just doesn't happen, okay? But thank you again, Ted. So good to see you. A couple hellos real quick. I want to shout out Big Earn in the house, giving props. Broncos country only. It's good to see you tonight, Big Earn. Shout out to Albert Knoppers. Give our best to the missus. Hope you guys are doing well. Merry Christmas to you. A shout out to Jeff Andrews, Pizza, indeed, big dog. Really appreciate you. Good seeing you tonight. And then this one here from Pearl saying, hey, I feel even if the Broncos do not make the playoffs, they're so much better with Sean Payton, and we have next year to look forward to. Love the Broncos. Indeed. I think that has been made quite clear, if nothing else up to this point, is Sean Payton has been the right hire. He's a net positive. You fail to make the playoffs this year, Zach, there will be questions. Even if you make the playoffs, there will be questions at quarterback and whether this still is an ideal quarterback situation for Sean Payton. And, we'll look forward to tackling all those conversations when the time comes. But I think it's pretty clear that they finally made the right hire. And this was something that you and I anticipated as being the right hire, because we're talking about the Walton Penners coming from the cold, hard capitalist, realities of a production-based business. You'd think the NFL is, what about retail? And so they're going to make sure they hire the best guy. And I think so far, the early returns show that it's pretty clear, net positive, Sean Payton.
Absolutely. Even the biggest skeptic would admit that. But here's what I don't want to happen, regardless of whether they make the playoffs or not. I don't want Sean Payton and the Broncos to get complacent. I don't want them to go into 2024 with a status quo mindset, kind of like the Giants from 22 to 23. They made the playoffs with Daniel Jones and they kind of just kept him as their starting quarterback. They bet the status quo. The Broncos, yeah, they're improved, but they have a priority list and a shopping list that's about this big right now. Quarterback is on there, inside linebacker is on there, defensive end is on there. A tight end is on there. They're going to need some serious personnel help. So they have the coach, but they still have work to do to get to that point, like I talked about, Chad, of becoming a perennial contender.
Miguel, good to see you, big dog. Thank you for the super chat, my friend. Love you. He says, what's up, fellas? With Joey's contract coming up, can you see Denver shooting for I think he means Josie. Yeah, shooting for a linebacker in round 1. So Josie Jewell got 3 games left as a Bronco under contract. Broncos could bring him back. They did it once before. This GM did. Now, not Sean Payton, but George Payton did. Meanwhile, Alex Singleton, who is among the league leaders in tackles and missed tackles, is under contract again next year. So there could be some turnover. Scott talks about this a lot. Drew Sanders clearly not quite ready for the limelight. A lot of talent there, and I think as long as he continues to get coached up and develop, there's a future. But if you arguably, Zach, even if Josie was under contract, you've got a linebacker issue. Certain teams, this duo can't keep up, especially in coverage. So is it feasible to think linebacker in round 1? And I'll also remind everybody, last linebacker this team drafted in the first round was DJ Williams back in 2004.
Just as an aside, it blew my mind today that Josie Jewell had press availability and he was railing to the media about how the NFL refined him or repunished him for his finger gun celebration. It's like, bro, you got blown out by 25 points. You missed tackles left and right. Nobody cares about your stupid finger guns. And I know, Miguel, you had this question before I went off my last tangent, but inside linebacker is on my shopping list because they can't have 2 of the same player. And that's what you have, 2-dimensional, if not 1-dimensional guys in Jewell and Alex Singleton. You have to have someone that's a sure tackler, can make an impact play behind the line of scrimmage, and also wins in pass coverage. Josie Jewell is none of those things.
It's worth mentioning too, and thank you, Scott, Mr. Producer, coming through. You know, the big boards out there, mock draft database, the highest ranked on the big board, off-ball linebacker, inside linebacker, is Jeremiah Trotter of Clemson at 53, so barely inside the second round. So there might not be, we'll see, a lot can change with Combine and Senior Bowl and East-West Shrine and all that stuff. But there might not be an off-ball guy, Zach, that is really worthy of a first-round consideration. I think really trying to figure out how to get this offense, because the defense, look, it has its holes. You need a bona fide stud like Superman pass rusher, and you're missing that. But this defense has gone large stretches. Even after that horrendous start, Zach, this defense went for a long stretch as literally the best unit in the league for about 4 weeks. When's the last time we've been able to say that about the Broncos offense? Like ever. Not since the days of Peyton Manning. So that's not a case in point on why they need to really figure out how to augment the offense and get the right tools there. But I think it probably is a decent harbinger to kind of count on in terms of trying to anticipate their thinking. Phil, thanks again, buddy. He says, guys, 3 keys to beat New England and also any news on Benito. Zach, if you want to get started on New England, I'm going to reperuse what Peyton said today.
Yeah, number 1 is show up. It's another primetime game for the Broncos, and they look like they didn't even come out of the hotel in Detroit. So show up to that game. It's in the Broncos home stadium, national audience, Christmas Eve. That's number 1. Number 2, you have to find a way to make Russell Wilson more of a game manager and make him more of a dynamic player. Preferably, Russell Wilson solely will win the Broncos this game because, like I mentioned earlier, Belichick will scheme Russ out of this. He'll take the running game away and make you go downfield to beat you. He'll take Cortland Sutton away, P. Ryan away. Hey, you want to get Jerry Jeudy involved? You want to have Marvin Mims catch passes? Be my guest. Something the Broncos have failed to do the entire season. Number 3 for the Broncos on defense is to watch out for the few playmakers New England has. They're kind of a physical team. You don't care about about Bailey Zappi. They do have Ramondre Stevenson, who may or may not play, Zeke Elliott. They have a couple decent receivers in Demario Douglas, but they do have a tight end in Hunter Henry, who is Bailey Zappi's best friend. And the Broncos continue to struggle against tight ends. It's a much easier matchup on defense for them. It comes down to the Broncos offense for me and what they can do to combat Belichick's acumen.
And by the way, on the subject of Benito, I did double check the Sean Payton presser today, and I remember him talking about an injury, but it was Dulcich. So we can talk about that too. No update on Benito. And yeah, you could use, if you're the Broncos, every horse you've got relative to rushing the passer. I think as a group, when they're all healthy and available, they're formidable, but they're not necessarily a unit that opponents are like tripping on in preparation, going, oh my gosh, like Von Miller circa 2014, 15, 16, where it's keeping guys up at night on the other side. So that's, to me, that's one of, if you're not going to draft offense early, I mean, honestly, I would love first thing the Broncos do, if depending on where exactly they end up falling in the draft, get a pass rusher, man, an edge guy. Troy, thank you, brother. He says, hey, brothers. Well, by the way, this is the Fawn Donkey, PHON on Twitter. He says, hey, guys, the fact that other teams' fans are talking about us means we're relevant. Good point. 3 wins, and who knows? And then upwards for next year. That's right. You never know. The bottom line is the Broncos have to take care, Zach, of their side of the street. And then from there, all you can do is let the chips fall. And that starts one game at a time, winning them all. They won 5 in a row against significantly stiffer competition. So you would think, Zach, that this is doable. But the one thing I'll say, as much as I echo myself and what you've said, again, it's the right guy. Sean Payton's been a net positive. The one thing that hasn't changed, even amongst that run of success with this year's Broncos, is you still can't really go into a game with confidence of really being, I mean, like in our Mile High roundtables every Friday, dude, we're just kind of guessing at it. It's educated guesses, don't get me wrong, but still, like, it's hard to really get a beat on what version of the Broncos are going to show up on a given game day, because even in the games they've won, Zach, it's like weird outlier type stuff one week, and then you're like, oh, that was weird, but at least they won. And then the next week, it's more outlier stuff, but in a different area, and you're like, well, hey, at least they won. So it's hard to say. I can't wait till the day comes where at least you might not be able to predict, Zach, if it's a win or a loss, but you can predict what kind of effort collectively you're going to see on the field.
Yeah, I mean, being Jekyll and Hyde is fun, I guess, and new and mysterious for a little while, Chad, but after 7 years, it gets old pretty fast. When other teams' fan bases are talking, not all publicity is good publicity. People still refer to the Broncos as dirty Denver and clowning Russ and all that, but it does feel good to be relevant. It does feel good to not be the laughingstock of the NFL. But man, I'd be lying if I said I didn't want more than that, Chad. I want the Broncos to aspire to more and to achieve more than just being relevant in the NFL.
Fully. But it also is, Rome's not built in a day. You got to take steps. There was the hopes of this being like a full miracles turnaround season died when you went 1-5. Now, if you still manage to make the playoffs, it still falls under the miracle category, but no longer, I think, especially after what we saw in Detroit, can you really count on that? Even like at 50% count on it, like halfway kind of, you just got to take it game by game. Gary, the swashbuckler himself, would love you, the GLP. Good to see you tonight, brother. Thank you so much for all you do to support us. He says, just hoping that Santa delivers 3 more wins. Go Broncos. That's all Broncos country wants for Christmas, Zach.
Yeah, better than a lump of coal, like Broncos country has gotten the last 7 Christmases. And, Gary,
last Christmas. Remember that?
Yeah, that was more than a lump, Chad. That was a whole big dump of coal right in our stockings.
Dump of coal, exactly.
But there's a chance, a better chance than not, that the Broncos do win out and go 10-7. At that point, without factoring any other team, they would have 76% odds to get into the postseason as a wild card. They need some help. They don't control their own destiny, but Gary, that dream is still alive. Please, Santa, let it happen.
Guys, we're about out of time, but we always make time for the Duchess. You know it. We love you. She is one of the first 2 faces you see on the MHH Mount Rushmore. And yes, we will be dropping an updated 2023 Mount Rushmore graphic or meme or whatever you want to call it very soon here. And no doubt, Michaela will be right at the very tippity top. So love you. Appreciate you so much. So generous. From the top rope, she jumps in to say, hi, Chad, Zach, Scott, and MHH family. Biggest issue on offense is our running. I'm not sure on that. It's god awful and been awful all season, in my opinion. Now, run defense, I think, is what she's trying to say. I mean, because the rushing offense, Zach, has been at least solid and at times very productive, but it's been solid enough for Sean Payton and Russell Wilson to kind of lean on it through, the play action and some of the mobile stuff he likes to do, Russ running around and whatnot. But it is a persistent problem, what she's getting at here. Running game. Stopping the run, right, is what you're getting at, Michaela. If not, go ahead and clarify one last thing in the chat. But I'm not sure how much you can. I mean, Sean Payton talked about it today. Like, hey, after you've watched the film, what are some of the things you saw that allowed Detroit to do what they did? And he talked about the run fits were just ridiculously off. You saw a lot of missed tackles, Zach. A lot of it didn't feel like 100% effort. But still, even when you get all those things, the D line in particular is where there's a pretty big talent drop off for the Broncos.
Yeah, and speaking to the offense, I'm pretty sure her question was she was wondering about the rushing offense as well. The issue is Javonte is much as we love him, as much as we commend him coming back from the knee injury, he's not been himself. He's not been the same powerful, dynamic running back. He's basically a slightly better version of CJ Anderson. Goes down on first contact a lot, unfortunately. But it's also before that is the offensive line or ahead of them, whatever. Because when they don't get a push, nothing happens. The pass protection breaks down. The run blocking breaks down. They had a capital B bad game. The whole front five. They've been good to dominant for large portions of the season, but they were exposed and looked a lot like what we saw in 2022, Chad. Just a bunch of pretenders out there.
No doubt. Thank you again, Michaela. Love you so much. Vote for Angelo jumping in on Super Chat, a newer name. Welcome. Thank you. I don't remember vote for Angelo. He's saying, caught you guys again, implying that there was a previous, like maybe first time super, but do you remember that handle?
No.
Either way, we're stoked to have you. Thank you for the support. Says, I caught you guys again. Do you think our O-line is a little overrated? Analytics say it's a top 10 unit. So this is a nice bookend to the topic Michaela had, and we got to go here very, very soon, unfortunately. But I would say that, the O-line this year, both as a run blocking unit and as a pass blocking unit, is leaps and bounds beyond what it's been in years past, which again, to me, is another sign of the Broncos heading in the right direction. I mean, not just from a production standpoint, Zach, but like, think about it health-wise. For this team to have the same starting five every game this deep into the season, like especially the preceding 4 years, unprecedented. So that's been really good to see. But yeah, it's still got its warts. Let's just say that, Zach.
This is why you can't trust analytics to form your complete and total opinion on something, because they've been playing well above expectation. They've been bleeding more out of that rock collectively than we thought they would. That would happen. But Mike McGlinchey, if you look on it on an individual basis, their talent as a whole is not top 10 worthy. They've been getting better results from lesser talent like Lloyd Cushenberry, like Quinn Miners, even to an extent. He's been great this year, but he wasn't seen as an all-pro before this season. Garrett Bowles was always a wild card. Mike McGlinchey, see, I was hesitant, Chad, because he's an $87 million tackle, but he's not playing anywhere near that. He's been Mike McFlinchy for the most better part of the season. So when they play above expectation and things break right, they look like a top 10 unit. But when a team game plans against them and breaks them down, they look god awful. And they looked god awful in Detroit.
Amen to that. Sorry, we got to cut things a little bit short tonight, guys. I got to go. I can't break my daughter's heart. Hope you understand this. But we got a few messages before we dip out.
Another tremendous episode of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, please follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account at Mile High Huddle, Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch, check out mhhmerch.com and get you some. If you haven't, drop us a like at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. You can find us on Instagram at mile_high_huddle. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your Football Priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But if anything, please subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
That it does. And yes, Scott reminded me, yes, this is a first-time super chat. This is now number 2, but tonight was the first time for Vote for Angelo. So again, welcome. Connect with us on Twitter. Don't be a stranger. I feel like with no run game, says Vote for Angelo, the pass protection is lacking. Well, I think, again, like everything's symbiotic in the game of football, but I think you just need a more explosive running back with a little bit better vision, and a lot of the seeming inefficiencies that it's easy to blame the O-line on, but like Javonte Williams, consistent in terms of his power, consistent in terms of his effort, but he does miss a lot of holes and he does run into contact a lot and he doesn't really explode. Like that's another aspect of the roster I think could use a little bit of an upgrade next year. That doesn't mean move on from Javonte or that he won't get better. This is his first year back, Zach, from a harsh knee injury, and then we'll dip out.
I mean, yeah, they can use a more dynamic running back. They can use a quarterback who's not a caretaker for a large part of a game, a more dynamic quarterback that can threaten a defense through the air. They can use better run blocking overall, better right tackle play, better center play at times. So again, it's never black and white for me, Chad. When they have a collective disaster like that was the Lions game, it is always multiple factors at play, and we saw that happen.
Vote for Angelo and all of our great subs, whether you're new or been with us a long time. Just remember, Mile High Huddle streams live every single day, 7 days a week, 6 p.m. Mountain to 7 p.m. Mountain. That hour, you can expect a live stream. The only exceptions to that are games, like when the game is an evening game and it runs beyond that, the show will come after the game, or some holidays. Lately, we used to not skip any holidays. Zach and I would show up, we'd still rock. Lately, we've been taking a few of them off. We took this year's Thanksgiving. We'll probably take Christmas off, but not Christmas Eve because it's a gut reaction night. But anyway, much love and respect. Thank you, Angelo, I'll just call you. And a special shout out to these great Super Chat superstars and supporters for helping us keep the lights on tonight. The Duchess, Michaela Parker, Michael Ronquillo, George Fox, Miyachi, Phil McLaughlin, Peter Cast, David McElrath, Ted Wunderlich, Miguel Santistevan Troy, Gary. Vote for Angelo, of course. Much love and respect. We'll see you guys, Zach and I, Thursday night. You got content on the Bright with Scott and Nick. And then building the Broncos, Mile High Insiders Wednesday night. Then we're back Thursday.
Have a great start to your week. We'll see you Thursday night. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.